What's up, everyone? And we are back for a new episode of Views from Metropolis. This week's episode, one of two, and I apologize for that. This week's episode is on none other than Smallville Season 2, aka when we really start digging into the meat and potatoes of this story. I'm really excited. No guests this episode, but this is when Smallville kind of took an interesting turn for me, especially. This season started when I was 8 years old. So like I said in the first episode, I have like a lifelong connection to Smallville. I am 30 years old. This show is 22 years old now. Or excuse me, 23 years old now. And I just, hey, I'm ready to dig in. I think this is probably arguably the best season of Smallville. That's just me personally, but we'll dive into that a little bit more. And yeah, so without further ado, let's check out the Views from Metropolis. And we are back. Smallville Season 2. I'm sorry for the delay with all the election drama, the amount of screenings that I've had to go to, and just overall content output the last few weeks. I was kind of feeling burnt out because I wasn't really having time for myself. So between all of that, this got pushed back. So now you get a special 2-episode week. You get today Views from Metropolis Smallville Season 2, which got to have that shirt right, and then you get Superman 2 with special guest Jeff Alterman this Friday, and then we'll be back on our semi-normal schedule. There are a few episodes that may be added to the initial count, so this may end up becoming more like a weekly podcast if things keep working out the way they are. So we'll see, but I am excited, and I'm just ready to get things going. But before I do, I got to do a little bit of housekeeping, because as always, make sure you like and subscribe to us over here on our YouTube. But be sure to subscribe to our sister channel, Watt Gaming. That's where our Twitch streams go to live after the fact, and that is run by one of my great business partners, Taylor Cleek. He streams a lot on our Twitch. I go live sometimes. But all of our streams go to live on the Watt Gaming channel. That's Watt Real Gaming on YouTube, and go check it out there. And if you want to find us on Twitch, that's twitch.tv/WattRealEnt. Also, if you haven't already, check out my review for Gladiator 2. That is up live on the channel now. Be sure to check it out. Really excited to talk about this film. I got to see it week and a half ago at this point, and at the time of this upload. And yeah, I am just ready. But that's not the only major review we have this week, because we also have Wicked. That's right, Wicked. I know I have so many overlapping just views coming from Wicked, but still, I got to plug it. It's one of the most anticipated films of the year by many people. So, hey, Wicked, check out that review when it drops tomorrow. So, yeah. But we're not here to talk about either of those. We're here to talk about Smallville, the Kawatche Caves, Clark accepting his destiny, all that fun stuff right now, because I think, to me, Smallville season 2 has always been my favorite season. It's a toss-up between season 2 and I want to say, is it 5 or 6? I think it's season 5 that really caught my attention when I was younger and watching this show, because I love this show, man. I really did, or I really do. Not did. It's present tense. I still love this show, but season 5 is like when it takes a real turn, uh, outside of just everything that happens. But we wouldn't get to where we needed to get in season 5 without season 4. Without season 2, because season 2 is what really sets up a lot of what goes down in Smallville going forward. Now, why is that? We get the development or further development of more powers for Clark, and then we kind of get to see what happens when Clark has to become more vulnerable to the people he cares about, but he's also trying to protect. Because this is the season where Pete Ross ends up having to learn about Clark's secret. And it's just because of fallout from what happened at the end of season 1, where the key was put into the ship and it disappeared. And you're just wondering, as the audience, it's in the middle of a cornfield, but Pete just happens to stumble across it after a car accident where he goes to check out on a guy, and then he sees it just right there in the cornfield and gets Clark to come back with him with the family truck to go check it out. So that was one of the more interesting storylines to me. But before I dive a little bit further into that, we got to talk about how the season opens with Jonathan being stuck in the graveyard cellar with the reporter, and Clark saving Lana from the tornado after leaving Chloe at the dance. And it's just a lot of emotions going into a season premiere. Now, like I said in Views from Metropolis season 1, or Views from Metropolis Smallville season 1 episode, we didn't start getting an idea of what Smallville was going to be until the last 4 to 6 episodes of season 1 of Smallville, because it was very much a creature feature. It was a creature or a villain of the week who had a meteor freak who had these special powers, and Clark had to stop them somehow. Now we start diving more into character psyches and everything that goes along with that. But I think one of the more interesting things is that Clark and family now have to start trusting other people. Like I mentioned with Pete, there's also this doctor, if I remember correctly. Oh, no. Is there? No, there. Yes, this is when Dr. Helen gets introduced. And Lex ends up dating her. She ends up learning slowly about Clark's secret because he has to trust her with a vial of his blood. And it's just this whole thing. But I think the most important thing to take away from this is where we start to really sow the seeds of Clark and Lex's relationship deteriorating, because this is arguably, this and season 3 are when Lex are at his most, Clark and Lex are at like the best best place in their relationship, but Lex takes some actions that clearly show he's not fully trusting Clark, and Clark shouldn't truly trust him. There are a couple episodes that are follow-up episodes to season 1 episodes, like Visage and the Ryan episode, where Visage is when you learn that they wrote Whitney off of the show, like he wasn't coming back. He died in battle, and that schoolmate who was obsessed with being Lana's friend in season 1, turns out she realized she's actually in love with Lana, and she's taking Whitney's shape just so she can try and be with Lana, even though Lana has been trying to break up with Whitney, or has broken up with Whitney through a video diary, actually. And this girl doesn't know that. So it was an interesting episode. It's hard to talk about because I feel like it's one of those episodes that was kind of gay bashing, because, and granted, keep in mind this episode came out in early 2003, because you have this young woman figuring out her sex, who has figured out that these weird feelings she had, that she thought she wanted to be this girl's best friend, is actually she's romantically in love with this girl, even if the feelings aren't reciprocated. So yeah, that's a weird episode to talk about. But just seeing episodes like Pa Kent being betrayed by a longtime friend who happened to be the sheriff of the town. The biggest episode, which I'll talk about or the two biggest episodes in my opinion, Lineage and Rosetta, which I'll talk about those at the end, because I feel like those are the two most important episodes to talk about. And third, followed by Exodus, which is, or Calling / Exodus, which those are in a 22 episode season, or 23 episode season. Those are like the 4 most important episodes I could think of. It's also a season where we start to see more of Dark Lex. We get to see Clark at his most vulnerable in Fever, which is when he gets sick from this toxic virus and falls into a coma, and Jonathan has to find the cure and has to explain. This is how Dr. Helen Bryce comes into the picture, because she has to take Clark's blood and keep it on the down low, because you can't really let people know Clark's an alien. There's also an episode like Prodigal, where we get a one-off episode. The only time we see Lex's long lost brother, which is a carryover from a season 1 storyline where this woman thinks that Clark is actually her long lost son, who she had with Lionel Luthor. And that's a really twisted. Prodigal is a really twisted episode that continues that storyline and kind of never follows up with it again. And then you have episodes like Rush, where it's this parasitic worm that turns everybody into like these thrill seekers, which I thought was interesting. But let's go back to those 4 episodes I brought up at first, or as the most important. Before I get that, I do have to mention Skinwalker, which is when we start learning about the Kawachi caves, which are actually these caves that that were set up as a gate for Clark and the Kryptonian just heritage, and that Jor-El pre-set up for him. Has this prophecy about the Traveler, which carries over to later seasons. We learn that key that was put in the ship has more to do with the caves than what we thought. And it's just a really interesting thing to visit, because The caves were something that Smallville is able to mine like 3 seasons of, and then they still occasionally go back to it. Um, but I really enjoyed the Skinwalker episode because it was the first time we saw signs that Clark could love anyone besides Lana, which comes on later on in the show when we finally get him with Lois and all that. So that was really cool. And then the most important episode of Smallville to me, and this is just as a fan, and now we're going to get into these these 4 episodes I listed as the most important of the season. Lineage is one of them, and I think that's important to me because it shows the parallels and how Clark and Lex's lives were so intertwined from the moment that Clark arrived. And I know that this isn't real Superman lore, but still, just for this show's lore, I think that's important because they are Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling are like the perfect foils for one another in this show. And as you get later on in the series, it's something that clearly becomes lacking in those last 3 seasons because Rosenbaum didn't resign, and rightfully so. But seeing why Jonathan hates the Luthers and why there's this distrust between Jonathan and the Luthers was really important to me. But also just revisiting that fateful day and seeing how instrumental Lionel was in starting this secret with the Kents. That was awesome. Then you go to the episode of Calling, which is when Clark has to when Clark puts the kryptonite key because he stole the regular key back from Lex, so Lex had a key, like he had a mold made of the key initially, or a 3D model of it, and then had some engraved in krypton on a hexagonal key, cut it to be the same, put the engravings on it and everything, and made out of kryptonite. And Clark has to use that to destroy the ship because Clark is so against following what Jor-El wants for him, and just avoiding his destiny. And then that leads to what happens in Exodus, which is Clark misses the wedding. Chloe starts considering Lionel's offer that he made to her that she investigate Clark for him, and all of these other issues that ultimately, after Clark has been branded by Jor-El in Calling with this symbol, that's why I had this shirt made, because this in Smallville is the symbol for the House of El. I thought that was really cool. And I remember being an 8-year-old kid and just draw after Clark gets scarred up, because I'm a cosplayer and I was always a kid who enjoyed dressing up and doing costumes and whatnot. What I did is when Clark got scarred, I took a red marker and did the same symbol. I'm like, all right, I'm scarred too, Clark. Let's go. I'm right there with you. But I wasn't feeling that red kryptonite, man. And that's an important thing that's introduced in the season is the red kryptonite. And that's introduced with these class rings that Clark gets a class ring, red being Smallville's color, and it causes Clark to go bad. And that is followed up on in the episode Exodus, because he had chosen to no longer Clark chose to run away. He had his other class ring destroyed. Chloe kept one because they discovered the red rings were red meteor rock and not rubies, and the green rings were kryptonite, of course, green meteor rock, as they call them. And so Clark knew Chloe took kept one for a keepsake for it was a story for them. So he took that one and put it on and is like, I'm leaving Smallville behind, runs away, tries to get Lana to run away with him. And just because life isn't going the way he wants it to. So I thought that was interesting. But the most important episode of all, and this is what I'll probably leave off on, is the episode Rosetta, which is the passing of the torch episode of Smallville, because this is Christopher Reeve as a special guest star where he is the brilliant scientist, Dr. Swan, who lets Clark know, I knew you were coming. I'm here to help. Whatever you need, I will be your sounding board. Now, sadly, this episode aired just about a year before Christopher Reeve passed, so we don't get a ton of Virgil Swan appearances like we were hoping we would. But it was just amazing to have Christopher Reeve pop on the show. And then hearing, if you watch Talkville or any of the Inside of You podcasts with Michael Rosenbaum, hearing Tom Welling talk about how filming that episode meant to him, because even though Christopher Reeve was agents and assistants, so okay, he can only be on set so long. The fact that he stayed on way past he was supposed to, just to talk to Tom and give words of wisdom and insight on how on playing Clark and playing Superman and trying to get the scene as best as they possibly could. I found that empowering and amazing and a great way to pass the torch, especially when this is the first person to, outside of Dean Cain, to really play Clark Kent. Like, we're seeing the formation of Clark and who we as the audience think Clark is. And I thought that was really fucking cool. And I'm sorry for my language. It's my podcast. I'll say it if I want. So overall, one of the best seasons of Smallville. I have nothing but positives to say about this show for the most part, season 4. But we'll get there along this way and along the journey. And I'm sorry this is a short episode. I am already in season 8, so just a little forewarning. I watched this season like almost a month ago, so need a little bit of refresher. Had to rely on some wiki notes and everything, but I promise when we get to Smallville season 3, be a much better episode, much more refreshed, and yeah. But you already saw all the plugs in the beginning. Remember to check those out. And until next time, folks, signing off, I am Matt, and these were the views from Metropolis. We'll see you next time.